From an athlete that broke his leg on live TV to the Olympic swimming pools turning green, we take a look at 15 fails of the 2016 Olympics. Number 15. Green swimming pools. It's not uncommon to see fun green water in Chicago every St. Patrick's Day. That's not what you're looking at here. This is the water in the swimming pools at the Rio Olympics. In addition to the gross green water, unidentified particles could be seen floating around the pools. If this was a public pool, you wouldn't even want to dip your toe into it. But these trained Olympians had to dive right in. Multiple Olympic pools turned this gross shade of green and had to be completely drained and refilled. What caused this change in color? Apparently, someone accidentally poured 160 liters of hydrogen peroxide instead of regular chlorine into the pools. This allowed the growth of algae and other bacteria in the water, turning over 2 million gallons of Olympic swimming pool water disgusting green. Number 14. Don't forget Zika. The Zika virus is extremely dangerous and is rampantly spreading across the globe. The virus is carried by a particular species of mosquito and can be spread by its bite. If infected, you may not even exhibit any symptoms, but you would definitely be more likely to get Guillain-Barré syndrome, which can potentially cause paralysis. Pregnant women who contract the virus could pass it on to their fetuses, and their babies could be born with serious birth defects. Overall, it's not a pretty picture, but guess where you're most likely to catch this dangerous virus? That's right, Central and South America. As fans flock to Rio de Janeiro from all over the globe, they've upped their chances of exposure to this dangerous disease. Several athletes refuse to participate in the Olympics for this very reason. You can lower your chances of contracting the disease by using bug spray and avoiding sexual contact with anyone who may have been exposed to the disease for a few weeks after. Number 13. Rio has 2 presidents right now. No, that wasn't a misread in the copy. Brazil truly has 2 presidents right now. Here's how it went down. The president-elect, Dilma Rousseff, allegedly committed administrative misconduct and was removed from office in May of this year. And by administrative misconduct, we mean covering up $20 billion of deficit and sinking the country into deeper recession. As the country begins the process of formally booting Dilma from office, Vice President and acting interim president Michael Temer is holding impeachment trials and likely new elections. Rather than sitting by and watching the process happen, he's actually having the government investigate corruption throughout the country. While this sounds great and Brazil could use a little cleaning up, many rumors suggest that he's not quite the squeaky clean politician himself. Number 12. Australian quarters unlivable. Building the structures, arenas, game grounds, and other Olympic facilities is a huge undertaking, and Rio struggled to get it all done in time for the opening ceremony. Because of the huge rush job, it's somewhat amazing that nothing actually came crashing down during the ceremony. Everything looked beautiful as the Olympics began, but looks can be deceiving. For example, as the Australian teams arrived and went to their assigned quarters, they found plenty of problems, like water damage, exposed wiring, dirty floors, leaking pipes, stopped-up toilets, and darkened stairwells, which led to both safety and health hazards. So what did they do? They reported the conditions to Olympic organizers. The response they got could definitely be perceived as insulting. The mayor of Rio allegedly responded by saying, "Put a kangaroo there to make them feel at home." Not cool, Eduardo Paez. Number 11. Least watched opening ceremony since 1996. Be honest, were you watching the opening ceremony? I didn't think so. The thing is, you weren't the only one. Ratings were down 28% from the 2012 Olympics in London. The last time the ratings were this low for an opening ceremony was 1996 in Atlanta. Since it's very likely you weren't watching, here's what you missed. Dancers and performers bounced around, and pictures from Brazil's long history were projected onto the floor. Sounds exciting, right? How about some more creativity and showmanship next time, guys? Number 10. Andreas Toba suffers early knee injury. Optimistic German gymnast Andreas Toby went into the Olympic Games very hopeful. Unfortunately, he injured his knee by landing improperly during his floor routine. Anyone who witnessed the injury would be certain that he wouldn't be able to perform for the rest of the Olympics. He was so determined to keep the German team in the running for a medal, he came back to perform his routine on the pommel horse. Limping, grimacing in pain, all bets against him, he did an outstanding job and even stuck the landing while wincing in pain. The team did pretty well overall, winning a gold in horizontal bar, though they didn't earn medals in pommel horse or the floor routine. Number 9. Jade Barbosa suffers ankle injury. Competing against the likes of American gymnasts Simone Biles and Gabby Douglas, Brazilian gymnast Jade Barbosa was an underdog, but still a fan favorite. Everyone was looking forward to her gymnastic routines. On her first pass on the floor routine, however, she almost face-planted onto the mat and landed poorly on her ankle. She tried to push through and persevere, a pained expression on her face as she went through the rest of her choreography. After a wobbly landing on the second pass, tears came from her eyes as she limped on her injured ankle. Unable to continue her routine, she sobbed as she left the floor and was taken in a wheelchair to Olympic EMTs. Number 8. Sara Menezes. Tragedy struck women's judo on day 1 of the Rio Olympics, when gold medalist defender Sara Menezes of Brazil suffered a broken arm in the quarterfinals. Her Mongolian opponent threw her to the mat and got her into an armbar. When she tried to flip onto her stomach to escape the hold, her arm became trapped and hyperextended. She immediately tapped out after what appeared to be a clear fracture. Rather than celebrating the victory, her opponent stayed by her side until her coach joined her on the mat. She hasn't made many appearances since the injury, but she will likely make a full recovery. Number 7. Robbed at gunpoint, or so they say. Every time the Olympics come around, we hear stories about Olympic athletes partying and living it up. American swimmers Jimmy Fagan, Jack Conger, Gunnar Bentz, and Ryan Lochte went out late on Sunday night to celebrate their final competitions. When they got back to the Olympic Village, they made a report of having been robbed at gunpoint. Lochte even claimed that a gun was put to his head when he refused to hand over his wallet. After some investigation was done, Rio police have another story. Apparently, the swimmers vandalized property and then caused the altercation. They made up the whole robbery story to throw people off their tracks. By the time this information came out, Lochte had already left the country and was home in America. The passports of the other swimmers were frozen by a Brazilian judge, and due to, quote, discrepancies in the reports of the robbery, 2 of the athletes were even pulled off of their plane home. Number 6. Cyclists run into photographer. Australian Richie Porte, Brit Chris Froome, and Netherlands native Bauke Mollema were doing very well in their cycling event. That is, until they ran into a motorbike that was taking camera footage. Sometimes we're tempted to laugh when we see such clumsy events take place, but these athletes were far from amused. Chris Froome decided a foot race was his best option and started running. Porte and Mollema both struggled a bit to get back on their bikes, but made every attempt to persevere. The official word is that the blame rests with the excessive amount of fans that happened to be crowding the area at the time. Wind was apparently also a factor. Number 5. Chinese basketball team. While the Olympics sound like a great place to be, the Chinese basketball team found themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time. Their bus became stuck in traffic on the highway in Rio. While they were looking out their windows, they began to hear screams, panic, and popping noises. One man got out of his car, grabbed his child from the back seat, and hid. Other people abandoned their cars and ran right off the road. What they were witnessing was a gang fight just outside their bus. The attack spilled across 2 highways just north of the city. Local law enforcement was unable to catch up with the 4 gang members involved in the attack. Security is always a big issue at the Olympics, but we're pretty sure the Chinese team wasn't expecting anything like this. Number 4. Ellie Downey lands on neck. British gymnast Ellie Downey had already demonstrated incredible prowess on the beam and bars. She was feeling a little dizzy when her turn came to take the mats. And in the middle of her amazing floor routine, suddenly, everything went wrong. What began as a well-executed and elegantly choreographed routine ended abruptly when she landed directly on her neck. Although she bounced right back up after the fall, she ended her routine early, saying, quote, "I crunched my neck." Luckily, there was no permanent damage and she was able to return in a different event, even though her chances at the floor routine were totally ruined. Number 3. Annemiek van Vleuten horrific crash. Annemiek van Vleuten, Dutch superstar cyclist, ended up in a terrible bike accident. Her bike didn't hold up as expected to while she was going down a steep hill and around a tight turn. She was sent flying, her wheels straight up in the air. She seemed paralyzed in pain as she lay in the gutter on the side of the road. She became furious with the designers of the course for not seeing the potentially life-threatening dangers, or if they did see them, not doing anything about them. She suffered several injuries but never lost consciousness. She had 3 spinal fractures, painful face lacerations, and a jarring concussion. Despite the horrific nature of the accident, she's actually recovering pretty quickly and has already been seen back on the bike training. Number 2. Andranik Karapetyan dislocates elbow. It's quite impressive to lift 429 pounds over your head, but this Armenian heavy lifter's moment of glory turned out to be one of the most painful events of his life. Just after he raised the barbell over his head, his arm began to buckle and snapped backwards. It hyperextended and broke out of the socket. This 20-year-old reigning champion had to withdraw from the Olympics. He will likely need surgery and plenty of rehab to get him into lifting shape again. And as a worst-case scenario, he may never be able to compete again. Number 1. French gymnast Samir Ait breaks leg. This athlete is adored and acclaimed all over France. His sprint towards the vault began with a deep breath. The audience held theirs as he launched into the air, flipped and tucked, and then dropped. Upon impact, his leg was immediately fractured. Not just a hairline fracture, an Olympic-size fracture. Audiences were torn as they couldn't bear to see the injury yet didn't want to look away. To make things even worse, after Olympic staffers loaded him onto a stretcher, they dropped him. As you can imagine, he was beyond upset. This fracture will take a long time to heal, but in a video he's released from the hospital, he claims he's recovering well.